Hey guys, this is a video I'm making to help me study and this might help you all. I'm going to go through every Mindtap question. Let's start with Chapter 8. Chapter 8, Quiz Before Class, Language and Thought. Question 1. What is the basic sound element of any language? A. Morpheme. B. Phoneme. C. Single word. D. Genotype. It's B. Phoneme. A morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning in a language. For example, the word unfriendly has un, friend and ly as its morphemes. C. is wrong just because. D is wrong because the genotype is an organism's individual collection of genes. Question 2. As a child gets older, what happens to his or her vocabulary? A. It is stable until grade 3 and then slowly increases. B. It doubles every 2 years between grade 1 and grade 5. C. It is stable until pre-puberty and then quickly increases. D. It doubles during grade 1 and grade 2 and then levels off. It's B. It doubles every 2 years between grade 1 and grade 5. Explanation from the textbook. Most youngsters' vocabularies soon begin to grow at a dizzying pace, as a vocabulary spurt often begins at around 18 to 24 months. By grade 1, the average child has a vocabulary of approximately 10,000 words, which builds to an astonishing 40,000 words by grade 5. In building these impressive vocabularies, some 2-year-olds learn as many as 20 new words every week. Question 3. Herbert Terrace analyzed videotapes of conversations between several chimps and their trainers. What did he conclude? A. They achieved a level of language comparable to that of human 2-year-olds. B. Their sentences were a product of imitation and operant conditioning. C. Their sentences were even more creative than those of young human children. D. They mastered the rules of language. The answer is B. Their sentences were a product of imitation and operant conditioning. Explanation from the textbook. Although these accomplishments were impressive, critics expressed doubts about whether Washoe and the other chimps that learned ASL had really acquired language skills. For example, Herbert Terrace, 1986, argued that these chimps showed little evidence of mastering rules of language. According to Terrace, the chimps' sentences were the products of imitation and operant conditioning, rather than spontaneous generations based on linguistic rules. Question 4. According to behaviorist theories, how do children learn to produce sentences? A. By applying their developing problem-solving skills to language tasks. B. By mastering rules for converting deep structure into surface structure. C. By progressing through discrete stages of language acquisition. D. By imitating the sentences of others and gradually improving their skill. It's D. By imitating the sentences of others and gradually improving their skill.
Explanation from the textbook. The behaviorist approach to language was first outlined by Skinner in his book Verbal Behavior, 1957. He argued that children learn language the same way they learn everything else, through imitation, reinforcement, and other established principles of conditioning. According to Skinner, vocalizations that are not reinforced gradually decline in frequency. The remaining vocalizations are shaped with reinforcers until they are correct. Behaviorists assert that by controlling reinforcement, parents encourage their children to learn the correct meaning and pronunciation of words. States and States, 1963. For example, as children grow older, parents may insist on closer and closer approximations of the word water before supplying the requested drink. Behavioral theorists also use the principles of imitation and reinforcement to explain how children learn syntax. According to the behaviorist's view, children learn how to construct sentences by imitating the sentences of adults and older children. If children's imitative statements are understood, parents are able to answer their questions or respond to their requests, thus reinforcing their verbal behavior. So the quick summary here is that whenever you see behaviorist and learning, think imitation. Question 5. Who is the most prominent advocate of the theory that language determines thought? A. Steven Pinker. B. Noam Chomsky. C. B. F. Skinner. D. Benjamin Horth. It's D. Benjamin Horth. For A. Steven Pinker, he argues that the special talent that humans have for language is a species-specific trait that is the product of natural selection. For B. Chomsky proposed the nativist theory of language development, which suggests that humans have an inborn propensity to develop language. For C. we already discussed Skinner and his lean by imitation theories. Question 6. Language is considered arbitrary because there is no built-in relationship between the sounds of words and what the words represent. What property of language describes this fact? A. Semantic. B. Generative. C. Phonemic. D. Structured. It's asemantic for B. Generative means a limited number of symbols can be combined in an infinite variety of ways. For C, we already discussed that phonemes are the smallest spoken sound units in a language. For D, structured refers to the rules that govern the arrangement of words into phrases and sentences. Question 7. What is a child doing when he or she uses the word dog to refer to all furry, four-legged house pets? A. Using metalinguistic awareness. B. Using telegraphic speech. C. Using an overextension. D. Using an underextension. It's C. Using an overextension. An overextension is when you apply concepts too broadly. For example, using dog for all kinds of animals or saying he go ed. For a metalinguistic awareness is being able to think on the language you're using. For example, being aware of irony, sarcasm and puns and double meanings. For B, telegraphic speech is speech with very basic subjects and commands. For example, go car and give doll. For D, an underextension is using a word to refer to a narrower set of items. For example, using the word doll to refer to only one specific kind of doll. Question 8. What conclusion is supported by research that compares the cognitive processing of monolingual and bilingual individuals? A. Adults who learned a second language in childhood have higher intelligence levels. B. Bilingual individuals have higher cognitive flexibility, analytical reasoning, and selective attention. C. There are no differences in cognitive processing of bilingual and monolingual individuals. D. Monolingual children have higher cognitive abilities but there are no differences among adults. Clearly the answer would be B, but you know which individuals have actually higher cognitive flexibility, analytical reasoning, and selective attention? The people who download this week's sponsor. Raid, Shadow Legends, trademark sign, is an immersive online experience with everything you'd expect from a brand new RPG title. It's got an amazing storyline, awesome 3D graphics, giant boss fights, PvP battles, and hundreds of never-before-seen champions to collect and customize. I never expected to get this level of performance out of a mobile game. Look how crazy the level of detail is on these champions. Raid, Shadow Legends, trademark sign, is getting big real fast, so you should definitely get in early. Starting now will give you a huge head start. There's also an upcoming special launch tournament with crazy prizes. And not to mention, this game is absolutely free. So go ahead and check out the video description to find out more about Raid, Shadow Legends, trademark sign. There, you will find a link to the store page and a special code to unlock all sorts of goodies. Using the special code Psych102, you can get 50,000 silver immediately, and a free epic level champion as part of the new players program. Courtesy of course of the Raid, Shadow Legends, trademark sign, devs. Now back to the question. It's B, bilingual individuals have higher cognitive flexibility, analytical reasoning, and selective attention. Here's the explanation from the textbook. While the evidence is somewhat mixed, depending on the variables measured and the exact nature of the participant populations that are compared, research suggests that bilingualism conveys some cognitive advantages that at least argue for the need for additional research on the topic. On some types of tasks, bilinguals may have a slight disadvantage in terms of raw language processing speed. When middle-class bilingual participants who are fluent in both languages are studied, they tend to score somewhat higher than monolingual participants on measures of cognitive flexibility, analytical reasoning, selective attention, and metalinguistic awareness. Question 9. According to Sue Savage-Rambor, the communicative abilities of Kanzi appear to meet which language criteria? A. Symbolism only. B. Symbolism and meaningfulness. C. Symbolism, meaningfulness, and generativity. D. Symbolism, meaningfulness, generativity, and structure. It's D. Symbolism, meaningfulness, generativity, and structure. To explain this one, Kanzi is a chimpanzee that was renowned for her sophisticated use of language. She demonstrated symbolism and meaningfulness, meaning she could tell that certain arbitrary words, commands and icons referred to specific items. She demonstrated generativity since she could understand sentences she hadn't heard before. And she demonstrated structure as she could differentiate between pour the Coke in the lemonade and pour the lemonade in the Coke. Question 10. According to behavioral psychologists, which aspect of speech do most parents encourage their children to learn? A. Meaning. B. Grammatical correctness. C. Number of words in a sentence. D. Accuracy in pronunciation. It's A. Meaning. Here is the same explanation for question 4. The behaviorist approach to language was first outlined by Skinner. He argued that children learn language the same way they learn everything else, through imitation, reinforcement, and other established principles of conditioning. According to Skinner, vocalizations that are not reinforced gradually decline in frequency. The remaining vocalizations are shaped with reinforcers until they are correct. Behaviorists assert that by controlling reinforcement, parents encourage their children to learn the correct meaning and pronunciation of words. For example, as children grow older, parents may insist on closer and closer approximations of the word water before supplying the requested drink. Behavioral theorists also use the principles of imitation and reinforcement to explain how children learn syntax. According to the behaviorist's view, children learn how to construct sentences by imitating the sentences of adults and older children. If children's imitative statements are understood, parents are able to answer their questions or respond to their requests, thus reinforcing their verbal behavior. So the quick summary here is that whenever you see behaviorist and learning, think imitation. Question 11. What was not proposed by Greenough as one of the basic categories of problems? A. Problems of arrangement. B. Problems of representation. C. Problems of inducing structure. D. Problems of transformation. It's B. Problems of representation. The others are categories of problems that Greenough came up with. Problems of arrangement require people to arrange the parts of a problem in a way that satisfies some criterion. For example, the string problem and anagrams. Problems of inducing structure require people to discover the relationships among numbers, words, symbols, or ideas. For example, the series completion problems and the analogy problems. Problems of transformation require people to carry out a sequence of transformations in order to reach a specific goal. For example, the hobbits and orcs problem and the water jar problem. Question 12. What type of problem is most likely solved through insight? A. Transformation. B. Arrangement. C. Analogy. D. Series completion. It's B. Arrangement. Insight is the sudden discovery of the correct solution following incorrect attempts based primarily on trial and error, which Greenough suggested works best with problems of arrangement. Personally, I feel all of them could be solved with insight, but whatever. Question 13. Which of the following factors is not a barrier to efficient problem solving? A. Functional fixedness. B. Imposing unnecessary constraints. C. Discarding irrelevant information. D. Using a mental set. It's C. Discarding irrelevant information, because that is a way to improve problem solving. The rest are, including not discarding irrelevant information. Barriers to efficient problem solving from the textbook. Irrelevant information. People often incorrectly assume that all of the numerical information in a problem is necessary to solve it. They therefore try to figure out how to use quantitative information before they even consider whether it's relevant. For example, the phone book problem. Functional fixedness. The tendency to perceive an item only in terms of its most common use. For example, not thinking you can use a screwdriver in other ways. Mental set. Reusing old problem solving techniques. For example, the water jar set. Unnecessary constraints. Assuming constraints that don't exist, like the 9-dot problem. Question 14. What is the set of possible pathways to a solution that a problem solver considers? A. Problem space. B. Algorithm. C. Heuristic. D. Working backward. It's A. Problem space. For B. An algorithm is a methodical, step-by-step procedure for trying all possible alternatives and searching for a solution to a problem. For C. Heuristics are shortcuts used in reaching solutions to problems. For D. Working backward is a strategy for solving a problem. Question 15. Which of the following is not a heuristic for problem solving? A. Forming sub-goals. B. Working backward. C. Searching for analogies. D. Trial and error. It's D. Trial and error, because it's not a shortcut. Heuristics are shortcuts. Question 16. According to Greenough, what type of problem involves the discovery of relationships between the elements of a problem? A. Arrangement. B. Transformation. C. Field dependence. D. Inducing structure. It's D. Inducing structure, since those kinds of problems, like analogies, require you to find the relationship. The others tell you the relationship as part of the problem. Question 17. What type of problem is illustrated by the statement, complete the series 1 2 3 3 4 5 6 6? A. Arrangement. B. Analogy. C. Transformation. D. Inducing structure. It's D. Inducing structure, since you gotta find the relationship between the numbers to solve the problem. Question 18. Which statement is good to keep in mind when solving problems containing numerical information? A. It is safe to assume that all the information will be needed to solve the problem. B. It is a good idea to start by trying to figure out how to use the numerical information. C. It is best to start by figuring out which information is relevant to the problem. D. Insight will typically produce the fastest, most accurate solution to the problem. It's C. Since, if you recall earlier, one of the problems with solving numerical questions is the presence of irrelevant information. For example, the phone book problem. Question 19. Which process involves identifying the intermediate steps that will help one solve a problem? A. Trial and error. B. Working backwards. C. Forming subgoals. D. Searching for analogies. It's C. Forming subgoals, since they'll let you know what to do to solve the problem. For B. Working backwards and D. Searching for analogies, you wouldn't know first if they'd work. For A. Trial and error, that's just trying all possible solutions until one works. Question 20. Bao is a teenage girl who has lived in China her whole life. What type of cognitive style would she most likely use? A. Analytic cognitive style. B. Heuristical cognitive style. C. Mental set. D. Holistic cognitive style. It's D. Holistic cognitive style, because Easterners see the whole, as it were, while Westerners have an analytic cognitive style where they see the parts. Question 21. What does Herbert Simon's theory of bounded rationality assert? A. People make rational decisions when they use additive strategies to consider fewer options. B. People make irrational decisions because they focus on only a few of the available options. C. People generally make irrational choices because they focus on maximizing personal gains. D. People often make rational decisions because they can evaluate many possible alternatives. It's B. People make irrational decisions because they focus on only a few of the available options. From the textbook it says choice overload occurs when people feel overwhelmed by decisions involving a large array of options. Left double quotation mark. Question 22. April is buying her first car and she is not confident that she understands the differences between different models. She goes to the dealer and he gives her a list of cars that she should consider. Based on decision-making research, which statement is most likely? A. The more options the dealer gives her, the happier she will be. B. She will make a faster decision if the dealer give her many options. C. If she spends more time deliberating, she will make a better decision. D. Having more options will allow her to feel educated about her options. It's D. Having more options will allow her to feel educated about her options. To be honest, I'm actually confused on this one. The last question said that having more options is more likely to induce choice paralysis, which A, B and D should fall into. C makes the most sense, followed by B. D was my last choice. Question 23. John is studying for his psychology exam. According to Kahneman, which thought process is he using? A. System 1. B. Fast pathway. C. Slow pathway. D. System 2. It's D. System 2. Explanation from the textbook. System 1. Thinking fast. And System 2. Thinking slow. System 1 is a more automatic mode of thinking in which we expend very little effort and over which we have no control. System 1 is involved when we read words on a billboard, detect hostility in someone's voice, answer questions such as 2 plus 2 plus. System 2 thinking is under our control and is more effortful. System 2 thinking is the thinking from which we derive our sense of choice, deliberation. System 2 is invoked when we look for a person in a crowd at a Pearl Jam concert who is wearing a black polo shirt, when we fill out our income tax forms, or when we try to maintain a faster walking speed than is normal for us. Question 24. What do you need to know to calculate expected value? A. Average value and actual probability of each outcome. B. Subjective utility and subjective probability of each outcome. C. Subjective probability and actual probability of each outcome. D. Average value and subjective utility of each outcome. It's A. Average value and actual probability of each outcome, because those objective things you can measure. The subjective value, utility and probability are all up to the individual person and may not even be rational in all cases. Question 25. What powerful influence generally occurs in the conjunction fallacy? A. Theory of bounded rationality. B. Representativeness heuristic. C. Availability heuristic. D. Alternative outcomes effect. It's B. Representativeness heuristic, because the conjunction fallacy occurs when people estimate that the odds of two uncertain events happening together are greater than the odds of either event happening alone. For example, that a shy quiet person, You're more likely to think he's more likely to be a university professor who's also a librarian than just a university professor. This is due to the representativeness heuristic where humans think shy equals librarian. Question 26. Kathy and Lily have both been accepted to university. Lily was accepted to 7 universities and Kathy was accepted to 3 schools. Based on research about choice, what is likely to occur? A. Kathy will find the decision easier and will spend less time making her decision. B. Because she has few choices, Kathy will decide to apply to more universities. C. Lily will spend much less time deciding which university to attend. D. When she is in 4th year, Kathy is more likely to be dissatisfied with her university. It's A. Kathy will find the decision easier and will spend less time making her decision. Remember choice overload? Question 27. Tanya has 6 children and all are boys. People often are surprised because this situation is so rare. What term applies to this situation? A. Algorithms. B. Searching for analogies. C. Representativeness heuristic. D. Availability heuristic. It's C. The representativeness heuristic. Because people generally expect an equal number of boys and girls and a series of 6 boys is considered a streak, when in actuality, the probability of having 6 boys is the same as having 3 boys and 3 girls and the same as having 6 girls because each child's gender is an independent probability. Having a boy as your first child doesn't influence the gender of your second child. The chance of a child being a boy is 50%. The chance of the child being a girl is 50%. The chance of having 6 boys 0.5 to the power of 6 or about 1.56%. It's the same for everything else. Question 28. Most people realize that the odds of winning a lottery are very small. Why do they continue to buy lottery tickets? A. Decisions that violate expected value could be based on the subjective utility of outcomes. B. Decisions are usually made in ways that are consistent with expected value. C. The rules of bounded rationality do not apply to the decision to buy a lottery ticket. D. Basing a decision on expected value is equivalent to using the elimination by aspects strategy. It's A. Decisions that violate expected value could be based on the subjective utility of outcomes. From the textbook. Yet a great many people gamble at racetracks and casinos and buy lottery tickets. Although they realize that the odds are against them, they continue to gamble. To explain decisions that violate expected value, some theories replace the objective value of an outcome with its subjective utility. Subjective utility represents what an outcome is personally worth to an individual. For example, buying a few lottery tickets may allow you to dream about becoming wealthy. Buying insurance may give you a sense of security. Subjective utilities like these vary from one person to another. If we know an individual's subjective utilities, we can better understand that person's risky decision making. Question 29. Connor recently started smoking because all his friends are smokers. When asked about his decision, given the health risks associated with smoking, Connor answered, "The statistics apply to overall averages and not individuals. Because I don't have any other bad habits, I'm probably at a very low risk." Which statement best describes Connor's reasoning in this situation? A. He is ignoring information on base rates. B. He is being led by the conjunction fallacy. C. He is using the availability heuristic to make his decision. D. He is using the representativeness heuristic to make his decision. It's A. He is ignoring information on base rates. Explanation from the textbook. People are particularly bad about applying base rates to themselves. People underestimate the risks of their own health impairing habits while viewing others' risks much more accurately. Thus, smokers are realistic in estimating the degree to which smoking increases someone else's risk of heart attack but underestimate the risk for themselves. Question 30. Evolutionary theorists assert that many errors in human reasoning, such as neglect of base rates and the conjunction fallacy, would vanish if the problems presented to people were reformulated in which of the following terms? A. Objective values and actual probabilities. B. Subjective utilities and probabilities. C. Probabilities and base rates. D. Problems that have adaptive significance. It's D. Problems that have adaptive significance. Explanation from the textbook. Some evolutionary psychologists have argued that humans only seem irrational because cognitive psychologists have been asking the wrong questions and formulating problems in the wrong ways that have nothing to do with the adaptive problems that the human mind has evolved to solve. The human mind consists of a large number of specialized cognitive mechanisms that have emerged over the course of evolution to solve specific adaptive problems. Thus, Human decision-making and problem-solving strategies have been tailored to handle real-world adaptive problems. End of part 1. Before class questions. Join me for part 2. Complete questions.